What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down some big news coming out for the market approaching tomorrow and the upcoming trading week, which you should be watching for as time goes on the charts. But just know that I am not a financial planner. Take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30, and the offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, as far as NIO is going, we have a very, very nice looking double bottom like pattern that's developing. And we've been on a bit of an uptrend so far. So even though we have this gap down here to fill around the 4.35 area, it is possible to see a small dip before this continues to uptrend and slowly make its way up closer to the much higher fours. I think there's a very good chance of that panning out. Now, that's despite some negative news that's been coming out. There's good news on their Twitter page about their ET9. I think that's very, very awesome to see as it's getting a lot more exposure. But there's been a lot of talk about NIO's struggles to deliver and to really see positive cash flow. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of struggles and there's not necessarily profitability yet. It's going to take a while to get there, but I'm still seeing a lot of headlines about that. I do believe NIO will achieve profitability perhaps by next year. But like I said before, it requires patience and a lot of time for us to really get there. Besides that, I think that they're doing a great job at setting themselves up for insanely good growth, and that's what they're prioritizing right now to really start scaling upwards. And as they start to expand to different continents, it's going to be a very, very big amount of growth that's coming. So I think that there's a lot of potential upside coming because of fundamentals. The short term is kind of nuanced, but right now, we're going to be looking to see what happens at least for the shorter term, and there is still some upside potential despite that. I want to make that very clear, despite what the headlines are saying. Now, I also want to mention that there's not really anything changing in terms of our data, but the price-price ratio is climbing a little bit, which tends to show that NIO is building a little bit more strength compared to before. And then Mondays tend to be green only about 49.05% of the time. We'll see if that shifts or not. The market was very, very red on Friday, especially after we got our PMI report. The data was very, very weak on Friday, showing lots of weakness when it comes to business activity, which almost stalled for the month of February. We also saw inflationary expectations go up because of tariff fears and things just like that. So just to be very, very clear about this, we have new tariff threats and actions thus far. So we had 10% tariffs on Chinese goods, with the exception being some packages or some products that are being imported that are under $800. But besides that, we saw 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods. And then up until March 4th, so that's about a little bit over a week from now, there's going to be a proposed tariff about 25% on most goods and 10% on Canadian energy. We'll see if this ends up happening and what's actually said about this, but that is leading to some concerns about prices and factors like that. That's part of why the market saw some fear on Friday. Not to mention the new virus that was discovered in China. This was discovered in a lab. It's not necessarily spreading, so that's the good piece of news about this. This is why we saw a lot of those pharmaceuticals, lots of those health stocks pushing quite a bit, whereas the others were a little bit weaker. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully, the market does see this news subside and the fear subsides as well. For earnings tomorrow, we have Berkshire Hathaway, which could affect the way the market ends up moving. So I'll give you guys an update about that tomorrow. Not to mention Domino's Pizza. Then after market close, we have like Hims and a few more announcing earnings. On Tuesday, we have the Home Depot and Planet Fitness, not to mention AMC. And on Wednesday, we have Lowe's, not to mention Nvda after market close, which is going to be a big one. So get ready for that. With that being said, what do I see for NIO? We have a nice double bottom like structure. We're trying to uptrend right now. There's a good chance we continue to climb closer to that $5 area, and I think there's a very good chance we achieve that. Besides that, I want to mention that SPY, however, is still a little bit weak, and I do think it's possible we dip a bit more. We have a support currently at 599.5 at our 200 EMA. There have been instances where we did touch the 597 to 598 area, and we bounced. This happened 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I think that we could get very close to 598-ish, maybe a little bit below that. We might dip a few more points before we try to bounce, and if we could reclaim 599.5 as soon as tomorrow, a dip and a bounce would be very likely. And if we could hold this, I'm going to be looking for a rebound move back up to about 605 as the most likely possibility. You could argue this drop was a little bit exaggerated and that the fear should subside over time, especially as we approach Nvidia's earnings. So look for a little bit more downside than a potential bounce as time goes on. For the QQQ, I do think we might be dipping a little bit more to between 524 and 522. It might dip a little bit more close to our 200 EMA. We bounced off 521 many, many times historically. So a small dip and a bounce could be coming again for the QQQ before we see some buyers defend it. For the Russell 2000, we could continue to see this dip a bit. We're watching this support right here around 216, if not 214. That's going to be a very, very strong support zone. It's possible we dip a little bit more into that zone before it tries to bounce back up for about 220. So keep that in mind. ES is dipping a bit. We could get very close to 6,000 before we see some buyers defend it. Overall, it's on an uptrend, but there might be a short-term dip towards the low 6,000s, if not between 59.80 and 6,000, that range, before we see some buyers defend us. For NQ, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We're kind of rejecting. This has to try to base around 21,500 where these wicks are. So it's possible we dip towards that area before we see some buyers defend. So just give it some time. For Bitcoin, we're on a bit of a downtrend right now. So we're kind of stuck in the middle. We have support to watch for at 95,000 and 96,500 is resistance, going back and forth. Might dip a bit more before it tries to bounce. So just give it some time. For Nvda is making lower highs right here. I do want to mention that Nvidia is at a key support, and there's also the possibility of an inverse head and shoulders. That's a possibility. There could be like a left shoulder here, then a head, and then we could be forming like a right shoulder. So if we do dip closer to like 130, I'll be watching to see if we get a bounce to about 140 plus. For Tesla, it's still a little bit more bearish. We are going to likely dip a bit more towards 130. I just want to keep that in mind. The 4 hours looking a bit weaker, and this does have potential to dip. But then, if we could try to base at 130 to 330 to 325, then we could try to bounce. That's where the support is down here. Because we're making lower highs and lower lows, this does favor it downside a little bit more to get close to about 330, and we'll see if we bounce or not. There's a lot of bad news that came out. Apple may retest 243 before it tries to bounce. AMD rejected. It's not really claiming this white trend line, so it's going to be at risk of declining to about 108. So keep that in mind. Coin has dumped quite a bit, especially with Bitcoin. This could be dipping a bit more towards 230 to 225. We have previous resistance becoming support at 224. So I see 224 to 230 likely coming. We'll see if we bounce or not. For Amazon, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We have to see if 215 holds. It's going to be a very, very key support. This is previous resistance becoming support, so watch 215. If we could hold this, I'm looking for a bounce on Amazon back up towards the 220s. If we lose 215, we're looking for a dump towards 210, so it's got to hold that key support. Look for a test of that tomorrow and hopefully a bounce. Meta's on a bit of a downtrend. We've been declining. We have an imbalance to fill towards 875. So watch 682. And if that fails us, then we have 672 coming. We'll see if we bounce or not. So 675 could be tested before it tries to bounce if it continues to decline. Microsoft has key support around 406. So we got to try to hold that 405 to 406 area. If that holds, we could bounce, but just give it some time. Google's on a bit of a downtrend, so we'll see how well this holds up. Otherwise, it could be tipping towards 180 or below. So I do favor downsides a little bit more. And then we'll see what happens from here. With that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. So please have a great rest of your day. The VIX had a very, very big green bar so far, but there have been instances where the VIX, it bounces like crazy and one day then just starts dumping. It's done this many, many times. So far, this is not really indicative that the market's on a massive downtrend yet. That's not really proof of this yet. This just suggests that this is a temporary pullback. And then if we get more bad news and this continues to break out, then that would be a sign that this is going to break out even higher and the market has more downside coming. But for now, it looks like what the VIX will do is it's going to consolidate and start slowly declining as the market tries to recover soon. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Could the market dip a bit more? Yes, I think it could, but then there might be a bounce coming as time goes on. So long as there's no major bad news, and so far there's not really too many catalysts coming out for the week. We do have tariffs potentially coming out a little bit over a week from now, so that's another catalyst, but it's still some time away. And then we have Nvidia's earnings in just a couple of days, so we'll see how that ends up affecting us. But NIO nonetheless has upside potential, could retest 4.39 to fill this gap before it tries to bounce and continues to push back up towards 4.5 and eventually 4.8. Look for a dip into the lower fours before it tries to bounce and give it the time it needs. I thank you all so much for listening. So have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back on the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.